Hey there, and welcome to True Scary Stories. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're from and what time you're watching. That helps YouTube know you love creepy stories, and it'll keep sending more your way.
3 Creepy True Night Drive Horror Stories. Hey everyone, it's me again. Before we get into tonight's stories, I just want to say thank you for all the support you've been showing on the channel. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, you already know what's about to go down. Tonight, I've got 3 stories for you. 3 terrifying encounters that happened to real people during night drives. You know that feeling when you're driving alone at night, and the darkness just seems to stretch on forever? When every pair of headlights in your rearview mirror feels like it's following you a little too closely? When you pass by a hitchhiker and can't help but wonder what would have happened if you'd stopped? These stories take that unease and crank it up to 11. So turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't look in your rearview mirror. Let's get into it. Story 1, The Hitchhiker. This first story comes from a guy named Marcus. He was 24 at the time, working a late shift at a warehouse distribution center just outside of Bakersfield, California. His shift ended at 2 in the morning, and he had about a 40-minute drive home through some pretty desolate stretches of highway. Now, Marcus had done this drive hundreds of times. He knew every turn, every exit, every gas station along the way. It was routine. Boring, even. He'd usually throw on a podcast or some music and just zone out until he pulled into his driveway. Sometimes he'd stop at the 24-hour truck stop near the halfway point to grab an energy drink or some chips. It was just part of his routine. But on this particular night in late October, something was different. There was this thick fog rolling across the highway. The kind of fog that makes your headlights almost useless because the beams just reflect back at you in this wall of white. Marcus had slowed down to about 45 miles per hour, squinting through the windshield, trying to stay in his lane. His high beams were completely worthless, so he'd switched them off, relying on the regular headlights and the broken white lines to guide him. He said the highway was completely empty. He hadn't seen another car in at least 20 minutes. Just him, the fog, and the broken white lines disappearing under his tires. The radio had started cutting in and out because of the remote location, so he turned it off. The only sound was the hum of his engine and the occasional thump of his tires hitting a tar strip in the pavement. That's when he saw her. Standing on the shoulder of the road, just barely visible through the fog about 50 yards ahead, was a woman. She was wearing what looked like a long white dress or nightgown, and her hair was hanging down in front of her face. She wasn't moving. Just standing there. Completely still. Like a statue. Marcus's first instinct was to keep driving. I mean, who stops for a random person on the side of the highway at 2 in the morning, right? Especially in the middle of nowhere. But as he got closer, he could see that she was soaking wet. Like absolutely drenched. And she had her thumb out, hitchhiking. He slowed down even more, his car crawling to about 20 miles per hour. And that's when she turned her head to look at him. The movement was slow, mechanical, like her neck was stiff. Marcus said her face was pale. Not just pale from the cold or the fog, but unnaturally pale. Almost gray, like cement. And her eyes, he said her eyes looked empty. Like she was looking at him, but not really seeing him. They were just dark. Hollow. Like looking into 2 black pits. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to just keep driving. To hit the gas and get the hell out of there. But there was also this part of him that felt bad. What if she was in trouble? What if she'd been in an accident or something? What if her car had broken down and she'd been walking for miles? It was freezing out there, and she was soaking wet. She could die of hypothermia. So against his better judgment, he pulled over. His hands were shaking as he put the car in park. He left the engine running and unlocked just the passenger door. He rolled down the passenger window about 2 inches, just enough to talk through, and called out to her. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, staring at him with those empty eyes. And then, slowly, She started walking toward the car. But it wasn't a normal walk. It was too slow, too smooth. Like she was gliding more than walking. Her feet didn't seem to be hitting the ground right. Marcus said his heart was pounding now. He could hear it in his ears, feel it in his throat. And this feeling of absolute dread just washed over him like ice water. His hand moved to the gear shift, ready to throw the car into drive and floor it. But then she was right there at the window. She leaned down, and her face was inches from the glass. Up close, Marcus could see that her skin wasn't just pale, it was almost translucent. He could see veins underneath, dark and purple like bruises spreading across her cheeks and forehead. And her hair wasn't just wet, it was absolutely saturated. Water was streaming down her face, down her neck, soaking into the white dress that clung to her thin frame. A pool of water was forming on the pavement below her. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, raspy, like she hadn't spoken in days. Or like she'd been screaming. "Please let me in. I need to get home." Marcus's throat was tight. He tried to swallow but couldn't. Where do you need to go?" he managed to ask, trying to keep his voice steady even though his whole body was trembling. She tilted her head at an unnatural angle, almost 45 degrees to the side. And then this smile spread across her face. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide. Way too wide. Her lips pulled back, revealing too many teeth, and they were gray and cracked. "Just down the road," she said, her voice taking on this sing-song quality. "Not far. Not far at all." That's when Marcus knew. He just knew. This wasn't a person who needed help. This was something else. Something wrong. His hand shot to the door lock button. He pressed it hard. All 4 doors locked with a heavy mechanical thunk. The woman's smile immediately vanished. Her face went completely blank for a second, and then her expression changed. Her eyes went from empty to furious. Rage twisted her features into something that barely looked human. "Let me in!" she screamed, her voice no longer hoarse but loud, guttural, animalistic. She slammed her hand against the window with incredible force, and the glass cracked. Not shattered but cracked, like a spiderweb spreading across the entire surface from the point of impact. Marcus didn't think. He just reacted. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The tires screeched and smoked, and the car fishtailed for a terrifying second before he regained control. He didn't look back. He just kept his eyes locked on the road ahead and drove as fast as he dared through the fog. His whole body was shaking. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. He could barely breathe. His mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. After about 5 minutes of driving in pure panic, he finally allowed himself to glance in the rearview mirror. And there she was, sitting in the back seat. Soaking wet, water dripping onto his upholstery. Staring directly at him in the mirror with those hollow black eyes. Marcus screamed and jerked the wheel hard to the right. The car swerved violently, the tires hitting the shoulder, gravel spraying everywhere. He nearly flipped the car before he managed to straighten it out. He whipped his head around to look at the back seat. Empty. Completely empty. He looked back in the mirror. Nothing there. Just his empty back seat. But he could still smell it. Stagnant water. Like a pond or a swamp. It filled the entire car. Marcus didn't stop driving until he got home. He blew through every stop sign and red light. He didn't care. He just needed to get home. When he finally pulled into his driveway, he sat there for a full 5 minutes with the engine running, staring at his house, too terrified to get out of the car. Eventually, he forced himself to move. He ran to his front door, fumbled with his keys, got inside, and locked every door and window in the house. He checked them all 3 times. Then he grabbed a baseball bat from his closet and sat on his couch, staring at the front door, waiting for the sun to come up. He didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every sound made him jump. He kept seeing her face in his mind. That smile. Those eyes. When morning finally came, The sunlight streaming through his windows felt like salvation. He went out to his car, his bat still in hand, to check the damage to the passenger window. But there was no crack. The glass was completely intact. Perfectly clear. Like nothing had happened. He ran his hand over it. Not even a scratch. He checked the back seat. The upholstery was completely dry. There was no water. No smell. Marcus spent the next few hours searching online for any reports of accidents or missing women in the area from the past few days, weeks, even months. Nothing. No accidents. No missing persons. No reports of anyone matching her description. He tried to tell himself he'd imagined it. That he'd been tired, that the fog had played tricks on his mind. But he knew what he saw. He knew what happened. To this day, Marcus refuses to drive that stretch of highway at night. He takes the long way home now, even though it adds an extra 30 minutes to his commute and costs him more in gas. He doesn't care. And he never, ever picks up hitchhikers. Not anymore. Not after that night. Because sometimes, Marcus says, the people standing on the side of the road aren't really people at all. Story 2, The Follower. This next story comes from a woman named Jenna. She was 22 years old and had been dating her boyfriend, Chris, for about a year. She lived in a small town in rural Pennsylvania called Millbrook, and Chris lived in the next town over, about 25 minutes away. She'd drive to his apartment after work a couple times a week, and they'd have dinner, watch movies, just hang out. The drive between their two towns was mostly through back roads and farmland. Nothing but fields, woods, and the occasional farmhouse set way back from the road. During the day, it was actually kind of pretty in a rustic sort of way. But at night, it was dark. Really dark. No streetlights. No businesses. Just your headlights and the road. Jenna had made this drive probably 100 times by this point. She wasn't scared of driving at night. She actually kind of enjoyed it. The roads were empty, it was quiet, peaceful even. She could blast her music, or just think, decompress after a long day at work. It was her time. But on this particular night in early November, something happened that changed everything. It was a Wednesday. She'd gone to Chris's place after work, they'd made dinner together, watched a couple episodes of some show on Netflix, and around midnight she'd decided to head home. She had to work early the next morning, and she was already going to be running on limited sleep. Chris had walked her to her car, kissed her goodnight, told her to text him when she got home. The usual routine. She pulled out of his apartment complex and headed toward the main road that would take her home. It was a clear night, cold but not freezing. There was a half moon that provided just enough light to see the silhouettes of the trees on either side of the road. She'd been driving for maybe 10 minutes, listening to music, when she noticed a car behind her. At first, she didn't think much of it. It was just another car on the road. Probably someone else heading home late from work, or something. But after a few minutes, she realized that it had been behind her for a while. Like since she'd left Chris's apartment complex. She made her first turn onto a smaller 2-lane road, and the car turned with her. Okay, she thought. Still not that weird. Maybe they're just going in the same general direction. This is the main route through this area. But then she made her second turn, onto an even smaller road that was really only used by people who lived on it or knew the area well. It wasn't a through road. It basically just connected a few farms and led to the road her house was on. The car turned again. Now she was starting to get nervous. She looked in her rearview mirror, trying to see what kind of car it was or if she could make out who was driving. But their headlights were bright, too bright, and she couldn't see anything beyond the glare. She sped up a little, going from 45 to about 55. The car behind her sped up too, matching her speed perfectly. It was staying exactly 3 car lengths behind her. No more, no less. When she slowed down to 40, it slowed down. The distance never changed. Jenna's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her heart was starting to race. She reached for her phone in the cup holder, thinking maybe she should call Chris, or even the police. But when she glanced at the screen, she saw that she had no service. She was in one of those dead zones that dotted the rural areas around here. No cell towers, no signal. She was completely alone. She tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just someone who happened to be going the same way. Maybe they lived on one of these back roads too. But the way they were following her, matching her speed exactly, never trying to pass, it felt wrong. It felt intentional. She decided to test it. There was a side road coming up on the right. Jenna knew it well. It was basically just a long driveway that led to an old abandoned farmhouse about half a mile off the main road. She and some friends had gone exploring there once during high school. It was a dead end. Nothing else down there. If the car followed her down that road, she'd know for sure that something was wrong. She slowed down and made the turn, her tires crunching on the gravel. She watched her rearview mirror, holding her breath. The car's headlights turned. They followed her. "Oh my God!" Jenna whispered. Her heart was hammering now. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely keep the car straight. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for one car, lined on both sides by tall trees that formed a canopy overhead, blocking out most of the moonlight. It was like driving through a tunnel. The only light came from her headlights and the headlights of the car behind her, which were still 3 car lengths back. Still perfectly spaced. The road curved and twisted, and Jenna was driving too fast now, taking the turns dangerously quick. Branches scraped against the sides of her car. She could see the abandoned farmhouse coming up ahead, its dark shape looming against the slightly lighter sky. The road ended in a small clearing in front of the farmhouse. She stopped the car and just sat there, her engine running, her breath coming in short gasps. Her mind was racing. What should she do? Try to turn around? Ram her way past them? Get out and run into the woods? The car behind her stopped too, about 20 feet back. The headlights stayed on, pointed directly at her car, flooding her interior with harsh white light. She couldn't see anything in her mirrors except the glare. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The only sound was her car idling and her own ragged breathing. And then the driver's side door of the car behind her opened. Jenna watched in the mirror, squinting against the light, as a figure stepped out. It was tall. Really tall. At least 6.5 feet. And it was wearing a long dark coat or jacket that went all the way down past its knees. She couldn't make out any features. The headlights were behind the figure, casting it in complete silhouette. The figure started walking toward her car. Slowly. Deliberately. Each footstep crunched on the gravel. Jenna's hands flew to the gear shift. She turned the key to restart the car. The engine cranked but didn't catch. She tried again. It cranked, sputtered, died. No, 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 she was saying, over and over. Please, please start. The figure was getting closer. Maybe 30 feet away now. She could hear the footsteps clearly. Crunch. 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 She turned the key again, pumping the gas pedal. The engine turned over but wouldn't start. She was flooding it. She knew she was flooding it, but she couldn't stop herself. 20 feet. She looked around frantically. The woods were too thick to drive through. The only way out was back the way she came, and this figure was blocking the path. 15 feet. She tried the ignition one more time. The engine roared to life. She didn't wait. She threw the car into reverse and slammed on the gas. The car shot backward, tires spinning wildly, throwing up gravel and dirt. She cranked the wheel hard, trying to swing the car around. The figure didn't run. It just stopped walking and stood there, watching her. Jenna managed to get the car turned around enough to get past. She shifted into drive and floored it, the car fishtailing as it fought for traction on the loose gravel. She shot down the narrow road, branches scraping and slapping against the car, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. She didn't look back. She was too terrified of what she might see. When she burst out onto the main road, she hung a hard left, her tires squealing. She looked in her rearview mirror. The road behind her was empty. No headlights. No car. Nothing. But she didn't slow down. She drove like a maniac all the way home, blowing through stop signs, pushing her car to its limit. When she got to her house, she pulled into the driveway and just sat there, shaking, crying, trying to catch her breath. She must have sat there for 20 minutes before she could bring herself to get out of the car. She sprinted to her front door, fumbled with her keys, got inside, and locked everything. She pulled out her phone. She had service now. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? Someone followed me? They didn't actually do anything? Instead, she called Chris. He answered on the second ring, groggy with sleep. "Hey babe, you make it home okay?" She almost told him. But then she stopped herself. It sounded crazy. She sounded crazy. She convinced herself that maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe the person was just lost. Maybe they were turning around at the farmhouse too. "Yeah," she said, her voice shaking. "Yeah, I'm home. Sorry, I forgot to text. You okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. Just tired. I'll talk to you tomorrow." She hung up before he could ask any more questions. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat on her couch with every light in the house on, staring at the front door. 2 days later, she was scrolling through Facebook on her lunch break when she saw a post shared by someone from her town. It was a news article. The headline read, "Local woman found dead near abandoned property." Jenna's blood ran cold. She clicked on the article. A woman named Sarah Mitchell, 31 years old, had been found dead in the woods near an abandoned farmhouse on Blackwood Road. That was the road. The road with the abandoned farmhouse where Jenna had been followed. The article said Sarah had been missing for 3 days. She'd been driving home from her evening shift at the hospital when her car broke down on one of the back roads. She'd called AAA, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the road, the driver's door open, her purse and phone still inside. They found her body 3 days later, half a mile into the woods. The police said they suspected foul play. There was evidence that someone had been following her before her car broke down. Tire tracks showed another vehicle had stopped near hers. Jenna felt sick. She read the article 3 more times, her hands shaking. This happened 2 nights before she'd been followed. Which meant whoever had followed her had just killed someone. And she'd been next. She never drove on back roads at night again. Now she takes the long way home, sticking to main roads and highways even though it adds 40 minutes to her drive. Because Jenna knows that if her car had stalled just a few seconds longer, it would have been her name in that article. And sometimes, late at night, she still wonders, who was that person in the long coat? And why did they let her go? Story 3, The Passenger. Our final story comes from a man named Leo. Leo was a rideshare driver, working the late shift to make ends meet. He was used to strange passengers and long, quiet nights. But one night, around 2:30 a.m., he got a pickup request that was different. The app showed the pickup location was on a remote, dead-end street near the edge of town, right where the city lights faded into countryside. The name of the passenger was just a single, blinking dot. No picture. No name. Just dot. Weird but not unheard of. Maybe someone's phone was broken. He drove out to the location. It was a dark, deserted road with a single old streetlight flickering at the very end. There was no one there. He was about to cancel the ride and mark it as a no-show, when his back passenger door suddenly opened. A woman slid into the seat. She was pale, with long dark hair, and she was wearing a simple, white summer dress, despite the chilly autumn air. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. "I didn't want to stand in the cold." Leo was a little creeped out, but a fare was a fare. "No problem," he said. "Where to?" The woman gave him an address in a nearby suburb. A perfectly normal, residential area. Leo nodded, confirmed the trip on his app, and started driving. The first 10 minutes were dead silent. Leo kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The woman was just sitting there, perfectly still, staring out the window at the passing darkness. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't fidget. She just stared. To break the tension, Leo tried to make conversation. "Late night for you, huh?" No response. He tried again. "Visiting family?" The woman slowly turned her head and looked directly at him in the mirror. Her eyes were dark, hollow. "I'm going home," she said, her voice barely audible over the road noise. The rest of the ride passed in that same, heavy silence. Leo felt a profound sense of dread building in his chest. He couldn't explain it. This woman hadn't done anything threatening, but every cell in his body was telling him that something was very, very wrong. He was never so relieved to see a destination. He pulled up to a cute, well-kept house. A porch light was on. "We're here," he said, forcing a cheerful tone. He heard the sound of the door opening and closing. He didn't look back. He just waited a moment, then hit the complete trip button on his app and drove away as fast as he dared, watching the house shrink in his rearview mirror. He let out a long, shaky breath. It's over, he thought. Just a weird, quiet passenger. A few minutes later, he stopped at a red light and decided to check his earnings for the night. He opened the trip history. The last ride was listed, but the fare was $0. Confused, he clicked on it. An error message popped up. Trip invalid. Passenger not found. Leo's blood went cold. What? He pulled over and stared at his phone. It made no sense. He had definitely confirmed the pickup. He had driven the route. Then, a new notification popped up on his screen. It was from the rideshare app's support team. It was a response to a report he never filed. The message read, "We have investigated your inquiry regarding the passenger account. This account was flagged and deactivated following a fatal incident last year. We apologize for the system error that allowed the ride request to be sent. Please disregard any related transactions." Leo sat in his car, the world spinning around him. A fatal incident? Driven by a morbid, chilling curiosity, he opened his internet browser and searched for the address he had just dropped the woman off at, combined with the words, accident, and last year. The news article loaded. His heart stopped. There was a picture of the very same house. The story detailed how a young woman, who lived there with her family, had been killed in a hit-and-run a year and a half ago. She had been walking home from a friend's house, on a remote dead-end street, wearing a white summer dress. The article included her picture. It was the woman from his back seat. Leo had just given a ghost a ride home. 3 ordinary drives. 3 journeys that ended in the inexplicable. The open road at night holds more than just darkness. It holds secrets, echoes, and things that should not be. So the next time you're driving alone after midnight, and you see a pair of headlights that seem a little too close, or you pull into a rest stop that feels a little too quiet, or you pick up a passenger who feels a little too cold, just remember these stories. And whatever you do, keep driving.